Hi, everyone. This is a great turnout. Thanks for making it out today. I'm going to introduce our other panelists, and then we'll dive right into things. So we've got Greg Iwinski, who is a current council member and on the negotiating committee. Greg also has written for The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, for Last Week Tonight, John Oliver. He's won a couple Emmys. He's a pretty talented guy when he's not running strikes. We have Zoanne Clack, who... she has served on negotiating committee before and also been served as a WGA West board member and brought you literally hundreds of episodes of Grey's Anatomy. And finally, Julie Plec, who is a standard here at ATX. Julie has made more television than all of us combined. You know, among other things, The Vampire Diaries, which I'm sure there's many fans here. So we're going to dive in a moment here, but first I'd like to ask, how many of you are in a union? Raise your hand. Okay, a few of you. Yeah, all right, great, terrific. Well, for those of you who aren't, I want to give you a sense of what it feels like to be in a union. So it's a little audience participation here for a moment. Ma'am, I would like you to... or that's fine, yeah. I want you just to clap. Just one person. Okay, that's the sound of one person clapping, right? Okay, now ma'am, keep going. You're gonna keep going. You started it off, you're the first member of the union. Now ma'am, will you join? Not sure. Okay, third person here. Okay, the whole first row. Match each other. Second row, join in. Third row. Fourth row. Fifth row. First half. The whole theater. That's what it feels like to be in a union. We have an agenda. We're pro-labor, we're pro-worker, we're pro-union. So that's what you're gonna hear from us tonight. Let's get things started here. Greg, tell us how we got here, what's at stake, and where we're at now.
Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I'm on the negotiating committee, which is a 17-person team of writers from the East and the West across all the different things we write. That's film and episodic television and late night and soap operas and game shows and everything that we cover as a team along with the staff in East and West to build a plan for what our negotiations are every 3 years and then to go in and to try to negotiate for that plan. So we started months and months ago building a plan based on where writers are at and what we need in our next contract. And that led to 6 weeks of negotiation with the Association of Motion Picture and Television Producers, the AMPTP, in a mall in Sherman Oaks, California. There's a very big conference room. This is very real. It's weird. There's a Buffalo Wild Wings a couple stops down if you get stressed. And we went there to sit down face to face and to say, here are the issues that writers have. And you may or may not have seen writers that you know talking about it online or what we've put online as a guild. But essentially, we were at a place where our argument was that the streaming model of television that was so appealing lots of years ago because they said, well, you lose some labor protections, but you gain a big check up front, that system had not worked and that it was leading to not only television not being, the people making television not being able to execute their vision, but also creating an unsustainable system that was eliminating the creation of new and experienced showrunners, that was leaving us with shows that were, canceled mid-run, and that was also destroying writer pay. Because again, we have to live in New York or Los Angeles, which are not cheap. And so in doing that, I grew up in Arizona, so I've seen what realistic rent looks like, and then I've also seen New York and LA rent, and maybe Austin rent. And so having to do that in a situation where now you can be someone who writes on a hit television show and makes $80,000 a year and has to be on food stamps. even though your show is being nominated for awards that the studio is happy to take credit for. So we came and presented our argument for solutions to that system. One of the things I'm very proud about with the Writers Guild is that we are member-based and member-led. So we did not focus group. We did not go in and ask a management company what we should be asking for. We asked our members, 11,000 members, and we got back 7,000 surveys that talked about that their pay had been destroyed, that screenwriters had been asked to do rewrite after rewrite of free work when they weren't being paid for a rewrite because it was just not quite good enough for months and months and months, with the back half of their payment hanging over their head, that, you know, that mini rooms had changed shows, that we had taken writers out of production, that late night writers had no protections in streaming television, not even a minimum wage. And we brought these arguments to the studios and presented our solutions. I had gone in with the expectation that it would be a very difficult negotiation and that we would be in a situation where we would be presented with a deal that was not great, but hard to say no to. And that is not what happened. We did 6 weeks of negotiations, and at the end of it, I'm not saying anything that the Guild has not already said, that in that last couple days of negotiations, we were still incredibly far apart. And we were offered things that we published online. The night that the strike was called, we put out where we were. Half of the things that we talked about, they did not respond to. And for many of the things like the screenwriter problem, they said they were willing to meet with us to explain why we were incorrect. They offered a meeting with screenwriters to explain how free work does not happen. Instead of bringing writers onto set, they offered to create a free unpaid internship in which you could bring a writer on set after they'd been writing. Now they're there for free, and they could shadow you as a showrunner to learn the craft of showrunning. These were their last and best offers. So that's why we're in a strike.
Can you put in perspective the amount of money we're talking about in terms of their profits and what we're asking for?
Yeah, we're talking about in total $450 million across all 7 companies to solve this. It has already cost almost $1 billion, the delays, production shutdowns, and damage of the strike. So we are already way past what it would have cost to give us the deal. In perspective, there are companies for whom their share of it is 10 or 15 or $17 million, which is what their exec makes in a month, in terms of paying all of the people who start with nothing and give them the products that are worth these billions of dollars. Profits of tens of billions of dollars, and you're talking about $500,000 across the industry.
Right, so 450 million sounds like a lot, but when you put in perspective of an industry that's making many billions of dollars, if we got everything we asked for, we're looking at less than 2% of their yearly revenues, right?
That's of their profits. That's not off like money before. That's off the profit they're making after spending. It would be 2%. And again, to put in perspective, like there are lots of people who need to get paid, actors and directors, IATSE, Teamsters, these people. But writers start with something blank, and then they give you a show like The Office that will be quoted for the rest of time and used in memes and culturally is important. And you have the Minions showing up at a theme park, trying to get you to buy a smoothie. All of these ideas came from a writer's brain. That is worth at least 2%, and I would argue much more than that.
And what? Zoanne, will you talk a little bit about the age of streaming? Now, I mean, you've been at the center of network television for quite some time now, and those rooms are among the most difficult because you have to create over 20 episodes a season. Writers' rooms are necessary in order just for the volume, and then to do it at quality requires a superhuman amount of work. And things have changed a lot since you started out. Can you talk, writers' rooms are at the center of these negotiations, keeping writers' rooms alive and central to the creative process and to the business. Can you talk a little bit about your experience in terms of how you've seen things change?
Yeah, as Beau said, I've given you hundreds of episodes of Grey's Anatomy, and part of that reason is because I am super afraid to leave. Because, network TV is kind of the, people don't believe that it's as worthy or, prize winning, which it isn't, by the way. We haven't heard of a prize in many, many years, but we don't do the award thing, but we do the stability thing. And just the fact that you could go out and I could have my 22 episodes of network TV and go out to streaming and maybe get a 6-episode order and then not get a job again for 2 years frightens me to the core of my soul. I've known a lot of people who, worked for 2 years on a 6 or 8 episode season, got a lot of awards, got a lot of accolades, but when you really look down at it, maybe they've made $80,000, $100,000 over the course of these 2 years and done a lot of free work, a lot of free production, a lot of free editing, because their rooms go away. Like, the writers literally go away, and the showrunner and maybe one other person is responsible for doing all the production, doing all of the filming, being on set. So all of these other writers have been paid their minimal fees for the amount of time the amount of weeks that they are bargained for, and then they're gone. So they don't learn the business, they don't see the fruits of their labor. Any rewrites have to be the showrunner or this other person that they've kept. I do have a friend who there's a writing team that just did A Small Light, which is, you should watch it if you haven't. And when they first went in, the network was like, so you guys are gonna be writing alone, right? And they were like, no, we're gonna have a writer's room. So it's expected now that people just come in and just write all of their episodes with the creators, which is also just, something that needs to be fought for. And this is kind of why we're asking for the minimum amount of people in the rooms. Because for like one big reason, I think, is that if we don't have enough people investing into our healthcare system and to our pension plan, that's gonna go away. Like, we need to have people working to buy into that so that we can keep that flush for our future. And the other reason is just to have people learn and have people see the fruits of their labor, and to not just be kind of the, one-off workers. What do they call those? The gig workers. Gig workers. Which is fine if that's what you want to do, but I think most of us went into this for a career. So in order to be sustainable and to have a career and to be able to move up the ladder, you have to be in a writer's room. You have to be on set. You have to learn these things. You have to learn to edit. You have to learn all of it in order to get to the next stage and to be a showrunner that can do the job. And there are lots of showrunners who, there's also this culture of, new, very young people coming in and not being in the writer's room and not being on shows and being made showrunners. Sometimes that works out fine, but sometimes they need not a lot of help. And it's also just very degrading to yourself if you have now been handed this $1 million industry to manage, not just to write for and create, but to manage, and you don't have the skills. You want to be able to have showrunners who have the knowledge, who have the dedication. I mean, everyone has a dedication, but just to know what they're doing and to feel elated by it and not be pushed down. So, in order to just have a life and not be depressed all the time, it's nice to have that baseline knowledge, which is not happening in the present way of doing things.
And Zoanne, it used to be that almost all television was network television. And so a season was a gig for at least a year, where you might be in a writer's room 40 or even 50 weeks a year. And I imagine on some shows it still is that case because of the volume. But there's a lot of shows now where there's mini rooms, as you were mentioning, where it might only be a few weeks. Or you're writing your episode and that's it, you're done. So network television and that model, which actually could sustain careers, growth, apprenticeship, and all that stuff, is only a fraction of the television that's being made right now.
A very small fraction. And, I think a lot of people now are trying to get back to network TV as far as writers. I've interviewed a lot of writers lately who are just please just get me back. Because it's stable and because you learn and because, you have that camaraderie, which you do not get at all in a mini room or a very short season of a room. And mini rooms, oh my God, I can't even with the mini rooms. It's the network or the executives want to not do their jobs, basically. They're like, I don't know, we think this show may be good. Why don't you guys write it and figure it out, and then we'll see if we're gonna green light it. In the past, it was executives stood by what they thought was good. they pushed for it and they became advocates of it. And if it didn't work, it didn't work, but they pushed. And now it's, the mini rooms, yeah, maybe not. And then if it does go, then they can just pull it. You can also film an entire season of things, and then they're just like, we're not gonna air it. Like, this is not how it's supposed to go. And just, trying to create a career again, this is not very sustainable for that to happen.
So the WGA has been on strike, I think, 7 times over the last 90 years. It's the most militant of all the entertainment unions and guilds. Put things in perspective, in 1960, there was a 6-month strike to get basic things like healthcare, pension, and residuals. And the last major strike that we had was in 2007, which was mostly over new media, to have jurisdiction over streaming. Julie, you were already a showrunner at that point, and that was a pretty intense 100-day strike. Can you talk a little bit about your experiences during that strike and how that strike is different than the one that we're currently in?
There's a lot that's so different, and I can try to break it down into like three categories. One is, back then we were nervous about what was ahead. We were concerned about what we saw coming down the pipeline, but there was an intangibility to that concern. It turned out to be quite prescient and ultimately catastrophically accurate, but it was concern. And so you were taking to the lines to fight for something down the line that you really thought would be important, but there was a nebulous, like, ephemeral quality to it, right? Now we're mad. We're just mad. And, I want to qualify this and say that, like, I've been lucky in my own career to reap a lot of the benefits of a successful career. So when I talk, I want to make it clear I'm talking on behalf or in the spirit of the people who struck in the past to get us the benefits that we have today, the people who are striking today to just hold on to their own livelihood, and the people that we're striking for, which are the me's and the we's of the next generations. So I just wanted to sort of say that out loud. But we're mad. I have friends who worked 15 years straight who don't have jobs right now, and those that are taking the jobs are taking the jobs at 30 to 40 to 50 to 60% less pay than they are used to making after a 15 to 20-year career. The sort of lack of care for the artists and the content creators of this business has reached a breaking point, not just in the Writers Guild, but in all labor guilds. So we now, whereas before we didn't have support of fellow unions and fellow guilds necessarily, it was like, oh, there go the writers out on strike again, woohoo. Now there's this moment in time where everyone is as mad as we are. We are able to have this community of raw anger that is fueling the solidarity on the picket lines, because there is a clear enemy in this, and it's not us. The next thing, oh, thank you. The second thing is, God bless them, the last gasp of millennials and the first gasp of Gen Z, because this is a community of folks who sort of have seen the shit hit them again and again. You were saying this last night. You said it so eloquently, Greg. It's like it started with, perhaps 9/11 and the fallout of that and war. And then it was the housing collapse and the financial collapse. And then it was sort of 2016 and people taking to the streets in protest. And then it was 2020 and people taking to the streets in protest. And then it was COVID and people taking to the streets in protest. Everything in this new generation is about taking the fight to the streets. And that's a really good thing for us as striking workers right now, is there is an energy and enthusiasm of activism that this community and this generation is just like, that's how they're wired. That's how they live and breathe. And that is a very important key to this, because striking is not fun. You have no job. It's hot. You have to walk for a lot of hours. These are writers, we don't do that. We don't do that. And so to have that like raw energy of true union power is not something that you get every cycle in this guild. You know, you don't always have people that are like, yeah, you know, solidarity. Most times people are like, oh, okay, where do you want me to go? And do I have to? And okay, fine. So that's the good, right? We're mad and we have a spirit of like grassroots revolution that is really powerful, and we throw social media into that, and it's a game changer. And I'm not entirely sure that the bosses sort of could have predicted this. I'm sure they're a little bit nervous about it, I would think, but it's nice to see. But the third thing is the thing that's sort of not so great, that's different between the two eras, is that back in 2007, the town was still, there was this sense that it was still run by people who cared about artists. And the people who were the big decision makers, they weren't necessarily always the top of the corporate food chain, or they weren't always necessarily like the tech people who are just into the widgets and the numbers and the algorithms. There were people in that mix who really truly believed in the, hey kid, let's go make a picture, you know? Let's go tell stories. Let's make art. And while they had to like manage a bottom line and they had to understand, you know, that the hard decisions had to be made, they did also truly believe in the spirit of art and creating art, and that there was money to be made for all in success. And I think that's all but gone. And that's not good for the people, you know, that are supporters of this union and the members of this union. It's not good, because when you put it in the perspective of the people that need to make the compassionate decision to compassionately reward artists for a job well done, there is no room for compassion at that level of corporate everything. And I think that will make this battle all that much more difficult, which is why, you know, when we talk about being in it for the long haul, we have to be in it for the long haul, because there isn't a room full of benevolence just holding out to be the least amount of benevolent that they can, but still benevolent. There's a room full of folks, I think, who would like to see union labor go away. I think they would like to see more, you know, just streamlined, smaller amount of jobs, smaller amount of pay, and to not have to share the success of those spoils necessarily if they don't have to. And that, I think, is what is our biggest hill to climb, is just the people in charge at the highest levels. And by the way, I don't know who they are. Like, do you?
Well, I mean, they were not at the negotiations.
Yeah.
So we were negotiating with labor lawyers and business affairs, not with the heads of studios or anyone like that, which is the same people that directors are talking to and that actors will talk to.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think of like Donna Langley and Susan Rovner and Perlina Bokwe. If all of them were in a room making these decisions, I like to think that this would be a much easier conversation. I don't know who's at the top.
It's very weird. Like, Zoanne, you and I were on negotiating committee at the same time for 2017. Can you describe what that room is like the sort of kabuki theater, and who you're sitting across from?
Are you talking about the one with the conference table in the middle?
Yeah.
Two sides. There's two sides that are like this and like this, and we're all just like looking at all the lawyers across from us with all their laptops.
Like, our negotiating committee is actually like writers, like members of the guild. Yeah. And then sitting across from you is a bunch of lawyers with laptops, right? And Carol Lombardini, but it's not and like David Zaslav's not there. He's getting picketed during BU commencement speeches, right? You know, so.
I want to speak to the exec of it all, because I think that is a huge part of this, which is there's no mythical writer world where every exec is like, I just love art so much, whatever it costs, go do your dream. Like, this is a business. But it's cool if the person running a hamburger stand thinks burgers taste good and likes them. And there is no evidence that is true. And so I think there's one of the problems in this streaming tech era is that you don't have people, you know, you've got the mini room system, which again, if you don't know, is why don't I just put 6 people in a room for 6 weeks, and they'll come up with that little thing called all the characters, all the storylines, the whole idea of what the show is and where it happens. And then once I have that, I can just go freelance scripts out. Because to greenlight a pilot, have the pilot shot, and stand behind it requires artistic voice and taste and belief. And there are a lot of middle executives and people closer to the writers that are not able to execute that do believe in that are speaking out or at least speaking out behind the scenes in favor of the writers. But at the top, you have a group of people who don't know. And that's why this is why the writer's room thing is so important. Because if you come in from on high and you're like, all I care about is quarterly profit for shareholders, you go, well, what if the whole NBA team, all my analogies are NBA, what if we just had like 2 all-stars and they did the whole game? And you go, well, you need like 11 other people so they don't die. But they go, but wait, do we? Because what if we just have LeBron and AD and then they're both good? So they'll just have the ball. They can pass to each other. And everyone else is going, what is happening? And that's what's happening with staff size, is they're going, well, what if these 2 all-star writers just write all the episodes? And here's the thing. If you're a really important white dude, you can go, yeah, whatever, or no, I want 6 writers. If you're a lower level or mid-level writer or a woman or person of color or a woman of color and you go, actually, I need 6 writers, they'll just say, no, because the white guy didn't need them, so you don't need them. And that is why we are fighting to the death for room size. It's not about giving people jobs where they aren't needed or forcing them onto someone's vision. It's that we need that safeguard because otherwise they're going to have 2 basketball players playing to death.
Speaking of that disdain for the creative process, we've got a number of questions here about AI, and that wasn't even on the pattern of demands initially, but then ChatGPT came along and it quickly sort of rose up the ranks of things that we're taking very seriously. So, obviously this doesn't affect just our industry. Any job most of you are doing will be impacted by AI in some form or another in the months or years to come. Can you tell us what the response was about AI, like the actual quote?
Well, for a long time, and then the thing about AI is, again, a member-led union. At every meeting we were at, writers were coming saying, you got to talk about this. And it kept moving up and became a core part. And we came to the APTP and said, we got to talk about it. Our position is that it's not going to be used as source material. It's not going to be something we rewrite, and our writing doesn't feed into this plagiarism machine. And they said nothing until at the very end they said, we don't want to limit ourselves on something we could take advantage of later. Which is like you saying, hey, Beau, why do you have that can of gasoline? And he's like, I might need it. Okay, I'm not less worried. And I think you're seeing that across the industries. And I believe that executives are very susceptible to vaporware and to some tech guy coming in going, AI is actually going to be able to fly us to the moon. And it doesn't really need to be, because like crypto, if I can just get all your money, then it doesn't matter if it doesn't pan out in the end, as long as I avoid the SEC. So there is some element of AI that is going to be people promising the moon and delivering a mountain. But it doesn't matter. And that's the real issue here, is what you're seeing with the studios is, what if it doesn't matter that it's good? Again, if I do not care about TV, I love television. I am a weirdo who loves television. Many of you are as well. I'm the person who watches SNL every night and is on a text thread with other late night writers being like, that camera move was late. What happened here? Oh my gosh, they're 30 seconds long. But if you don't love TV, if you say things like some executives at streaming companies have said, where I don't believe in quality, if you're saying those things, does it matter if an AI movie sucks and that the AI directing bot is doing really bad shots and that the AI actors are kind of glitching out? Does it matter if it keeps people from canceling a subscription? Maybe it doesn't to them. So the threat of us being replaced is not that they're ever going to match our quality. It's going to be that our bosses don't care. And so that's why we're going to fight for it, and that's why it's an existential thing. I hope that SAG fights really hard for it. I hope the DGA does as well. But for us, it's not something that we're willing to budge on.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, because AI has sort of become the face, like AI and Netflix, unfortunately, but AI has become the face of the villain of this strike for many of the unions, and certainly us. And we were talking just about the state of the business in general, and specifically the conversation was about the state of showrunners and sort of stripping of power and success away from showrunners and putting them in a situation where they don't feel like they have any autonomy, authority, or confidence, or as Zoanne is saying, the experience to even be doing their job. And a writer I was talking to, and I'd love to credit her, but I can't remember her full name, said, yeah, we have been getting slowly dehumanized for so long in the last, post-streaming, the launch of the streaming era. We've been getting so slowly dehumanized that no wonder we're looking at the threat of a robot being like our biggest villain here. And I thought that was really profound because that's really what it is. Nobody knows what AI is going to do other than achieve singularity and murder us all in our sleep. But I have compassion for the powers that be that are like, we don't even know what this means. Why would we cement rules in it? But there is a little bit of a fool me once, fool me twice thing happening because we got heavily gaslit in 2007. What are you fighting for? Something, some streaming. And the small gains that we got out of the 2007 strike got us, as Greg was saying, jurisdiction over new media, but at less price, less residual structure, smaller minimums, smaller script fees, because they were so new. Cut to now 15 years later, they are the behemoths of this industry. They are all getting our work for half price. And that's us having won gains in 2007. So to me, AI is new media. I don't understand it. I don't know where it's going, but it seems really important. And if we don't get something codified in language that a human being needs to do our jobs, we will never get that language and we will never have any protections. And I think that's what other unions are starting to understand as well. So it is truly the clarion call. It is the mockingjay of this strike.
The Mockingjay.
Yeah.
And didn't
A writer wrote that.
and didn't they say something about having a meeting about that too?
Yes.
Yeah, the proposal that is to all the unions on AI is that we will do an annual meeting to discuss the state of AI. So that, which I think is not serious or good, but so yes, they technically didn't say nothing. They said we were willing to meet once a year.
What's interesting too is that I was actually listening to this NPR interview with the creator of AI, who was like, "You guys have got to think about what AI." Like he was afraid of AI, but AMTP is like, eh. I'm like, could you listen to the person who
He's the Al Gore,
created it?
the Al Gore of AI. The sky is falling, I swear, and it is.
And they really haven't thought through because even the fact that, look, what an AI is a computer that takes other people's work and then puts similar things together to match keywords. So it's not thinking, it's not intelligence, it's about what can I stick next to each other. If I own a global IP, I should be terrified of that because everyone across the internet is going to be taking all my IP and using it to make their little thing. And my lawyers are going to hunt down every single independent film and short and website to make sure that in their computer they weren't stealing half of Snow White or something. So it's amazing to us that not just that they help writers with fighting AI or controlling AI, but studios should be doing it from their own financial benefit.
I just asked ChatGPT why the Writers Guild was on strike, and the answer makes it clear that they're in bed with management. I'm sorry, but as an AI language model, I don't have access to real-time news or current events beyond my September 2021 knowledge cutoff. Therefore, I cannot provide information on the specific reasons behind a potential Writers Guild strike, as it may be based on events that have occurred after my knowledge cutoff date. I recommend referring to reliable news sources or contacting the relevant Writers Guild for the most up-to-date and accurate information on any ongoing strikes or labor disputes. Well, luckily, you're here referring to reliable news from the Writers Guild itself. So, yeah.
At least they refer you to the Writers Guild.
Yes, that's true. It said to the relevant Writers Guild.
Please call Carol Lombardini and ask her what.
Please call Carol.
So we have a question here about how can emerging writers navigate this time other than picketing in solidarity, and I think we can expand that to how can TV fans, contribute. But let's start with emerging writers. Zoanne, you've worked with a ton of writers over the years, so you've seen people all levels of their careers, and I'm sure some of them were freaked out about a potential strike because, big myth is that, people that work in Hollywood, anyone that works in Hollywood is like super rich, and most writers are living, especially late night people, a squarely middle class and sometimes hand-to-mouth existence, as you alluded to before. But I mean, in terms of people that are early on in their career, what should they be thinking about in terms of what they can do, but also what it means to be part of a union in a community, and what the Guild has meant to you during your career in that sense of community?
Well, I have recently taken over Station 19, which is Grey's Anatomy's sister show, and our staff is very low level central. There's like producer down is like half of our staff, and they are all in it. It's kind of like what you were saying with the different generations, but they understand that this is going to affect their bottom line. They understand that they're going to be kind of hurting for a little while, but the greater good, the future of what this stands for is so in their minds and so powerful to where they're going to be and how their career is going to go in the future, that they are 100% behind it. And basically, it's just having that solidarity, walking those lines. I mean, I guess you guys wouldn't be there to walk the lines, but to offer any support that we can, and then hopefully SAG and DGA will be behind us also. I mean, I feel like if we had DGA and SAG also go out, which I'm not saying that they will, this thing could be over.
Yeah, I mean, the DGA is not typically been a striking union. SAG has gone on strike before, and it's by far the biggest of the unions. But there's a lot more militancy in both of those unions now, and especially IATSE, which is a craft trade union within the entertainment industry, and the Teamsters. They have not been crossing picket lines, which means that unlike 2007, when we have picketers show up at productions, a lot of times they get shut down. Because those people won't cross the line. It's a reminder that, like, if you don't have people to drive the cars and deliver stuff and people, and you don't have people to build sets or prop masters or set decorators, all of the hundreds of workers that it takes to actually make an episode of television or a movie, then it doesn't happen. So that's sort of intra-union solidarity and realizing, yeah, we do create something from nothing, but then all of those people bring it into a reality. And it takes hundreds of people to do that. When we actually team up together, we can cost the companies billions of dollars. And that's real power.
And that's one of the differences, too, between the 2007, because our contracts weren't all up at the same time, which they are now. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, and I mean, general advice for emerging writers, if you're pre-WGA, which is what we like to call it, because we hope you'll all end up getting that gig that gets your union card for you. Act as though you are in the WGA, now. Now, that's tough because you might have producers or people that, there's something you want to pursue, and you're like, I'm finally getting a leg up. But you will be part of this union one day if you've got the determination and talent, and you can begin now being part of this community and being in support. Also, for those of you that have $1 or $2 to spare, we've been raising money as a guild for something called the Entertainment Community Fund, which is, I believe it's entertainmentcommunity.org. And what that fund does is it helps people not only within the Writers Guild, but also our sibling unions who are under enormous financial distress because of the union. It offers grants and loans to help those people through tough times. And so if you have even $1 or $2 to spare, that's a great thing to do. And you're not helping out people like us. You're helping out people that are starting out or have been stuck at a sort of low level, low paying part of their career for years and like can't pay rent, So those are the people that you'd be helping if you were doing that. Julie, did you want to weigh in terms of like emerging writers and people that are starting out in their career and what a strike means to them, and also what the Guild has meant to you?
Yeah, well, oh my goodness. I mean, the Guild, you can have any opinion you want about labor unions and the labor movement, and those opinions are very fluid over generations. And to me, what my Guild most importantly represents is health insurance. The ability to be protected with benefits. They're so hard to get in the real world. They are so expensive to pay for, and they don't give you much protection unless you have the power of a union providing you with that protection. And everything else to me is additional cherries on top of that. The community, the minimums, the outreach, all of that. But for me, fundamentally, it's in this country right now, healthcare is so hard to, good healthcare is so hard to come by and so hard to keep. And I will be forever grateful that I am part of a union that protects me in that way.
Yeah, and Zoanne, you and I, it went down to the last minute in 2017 where we had to fight for years and finally got it because we were willing to strike to get like bare minimum parental leave.
Right.
But that's a real thing that affects people's lives that we were able to get because we were willing to withhold our labor, right? And so that there are people that are able to spend time with their infant children now and still get paid for at least a time that for almost 100 years before that was not possible. So these actions do actually benefit people in very real ways,
I wanted we had a nice conversation last night over several cocktails, and Greg was talking about late night contracts. And I wanted to ask you to kind of go through that again and how you feel about if you have to go home at the end of this.
Oh, yeah. Can you actually this is almost going to be impossible. Can you do the 2-minute version? Because Julie and I were like captivated by this, of what like a typical day for a late night writer
Oh, yeah.
is. Like
So good.
the 2-minute from like 8:30 a.m. to like, and then like go into then
How you get
the how you get paid and the truly offensive day rate proposal.
So late night television, I've worked on 5-day a week and once a week shows. I'm going to talk about the 5-day a week shows, the more traditional, the strip shows, is what you call it when it's once a week. And those shows are a real grind. Like soap operas, you make like 250 of them a year. I mean, soap operas sometimes make 100 more than that. But it is a very fast-moving machine. You come in around 8 or 8:30. You have ideas to pitch jokes. You pitch those to your head writers. That gets and it's late night writers, so some of our ideas are bad or not funny, or you can't say them on television. And those things get distilled down into a larger meeting around 9 o'clock. And this is kind of across most of these late night shows. So around 9 o'clock, you've got a meeting where then the head writers are pitching to the host and to the rest of the show because, again, you're making that show that day. So props needs to be in that meeting. So do the talent people. So do the graphics people, research. And so then you pitch around a bunch of jokes that maybe takes an hour. Now it's 10 o'clock and we've got assignments out for our game with our guest, or we're doing a sketch, or we're making a big chunk of long form monologue. And so then you have from about 10 to noon to write. And so you're writing, 2 or 3 minutes of comedy monologue with jokes and telling a story. Like I need to explain the debt ceiling deal and how it happened. And I'm going to have like 3 minutes of monologue. Okay, 2 hours. And so you spend 2 hours writing that. You might spend some of that time like getting snacks. And because again, you have to remember, like we're like
writers.
Yeah. And like even in that time crunch, you're still like late night writers, we're kind of like, I don't know what the right word is like broken in our brains. So it's like you have 2 hours to write this very intense thing and it has to be done at noon. And you're like, yeah, but what if I went and got M&Ms for like 10 minutes? And then you come back and you're like, okay, cool. But you turn it in at noon, and then at noon everyone's turned in either their monologue jokes or their monologue chunks or those bits. And then the whole show around lunchtime is read down so that it can be turned into one big script. Then around 1 or 2 o'clock, you do rehearsal. You go down to the stage. The host is there. They now have been busy doing a bunch of other things because hosting is learning what the guest is going to do, figuring out things on time, saying yes and no to things. Like you're running a 200-person company. Then they come back and they get to do the monologue and run down the whole script. They have notes. You implement those notes after rehearsal. You go do, you're rewriting. And then around 4 o'clock or an hour before taping, hour and a half, audience comes in and now you're rewriting the show. So if you are in that last pitch of the show, the audience is already in the seats, the band is playing, and you and some other writers and the host are rewriting the show one last pass. And some very helpful, nice producer is knocking on the door and going, you have 30 minutes, you have 25 minutes, you have 20 minutes. And you are going through it being like, can we fix this joke? What's a funnier city to say? Is a badger as funny as a porcupine? And you're just going through it, just tweak. And then you run out of time, or you finish just before, and you go, okay, we're good. And then it's 5:30, and you say goodbye to the host, and they walk out, and they do the show, and you sigh, and you go home, and you get in the shower, and you think, well, I've got to have 3 jokes for tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. And that's what it is to write late night television every day. And in return for doing that, the AMPTP has agreed to give us the security of 13-week at a time employment. So our contracts are 3 months, and then every 3 months you're let go and you find out if you come back. And our argument going into the negotiations was that seems short. Because the cool thing is we actually give up a 10% discount to our pay for 13-week at a time contracts. Because they're saying, we're giving you security, we're taking a discount. Our argument is, that sucks. Don't do that. And so but you know, it is at least 3 months you can be like, hey, my kid's gonna be in school. I could maybe pay rent. I understand where I'm gonna be for these 3 months. And so we went in to negotiate that essentially we wanted to do what episodic TV had done in 2014. The terms and conditions we had in television, we wanted to put on streaming. Why? Because streaming is television. Because Late Night with Seth Meyers is shot in 30 Rock. And Amber Ruffin's show is shot in 30 Rock, and they're shot in the same studio with the same cameras and the same crew on the same floor with the same cue card guy. One of those staffs has 13-week contracts and minimum pay rates. The other does not. Because on Peacock, it is apparently such a different existential show that it does not deserve basic protections. Our argument was that that had to end. Their response was to say that we would like to pay writers a day rate. 1 day at a time, each day being a quarter of your weekly rate. So for us, in late night, this is an existential fight. So it is not an argument about if we are going to have a 5% increase or a 7% increase. It is not an argument about how many shows in a season we get to have. It is an argument about that if we lose this fight, I cannot put my kids in school in New York. The people I am friends with will not be able to get approved for an apartment on a day rate. It means that late night writers will not be able to do late night. It means that you will have a nightmare scenario where you can hire a couple of writers to come in on Monday, write as many monologue jokes as they can, and then you let them go for the rest of the week. So for us, and I think for our fans of late night, this to me is one of the most animating things in our contract. Nowhere else in the NBA is there a group of writers who do not have minimum protections. It is something that can't be allowed to spread and can't be allowed to continue to exist because we're making the same work and we are doing the same amount of work. And boy, howdy, did a lot of these executives come out for the last 6 years and be like, you kept me so sane during Trump. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I loved your jokes. Well, if you love your jokes, let me feed my kids.
Yes.
That wasn't 2 minutes. I'm sorry. Yeah, no, that was great, Greg. Since you're on a roll, really quickly, we didn't get to the part. What can the average person or exceptional person that doesn't happen to be in the guild do? And what TV fans? How can they help? What can they do?
I mean, donating to the fund is huge, but also these people, executives at the top, public perception is important because it affects stock price. And I, as a member of the negotiating committee and the Guild Council, can and will not tell you to subscribe or unsubscribe or do any kind of immediate financial action. But to tell companies at their customer service level, to tell companies with where stocks are invested, to tell companies all these things that you are not cool with what's happening. I mean, the Netflix shareholders voted down executive pay this week because the Netflix executives... The top 6 Netflix execs came and said, hey, we want to raise, and the shareholders said no. To continue this wave of public sentiment that says, we like the people who are making our stuff more than we like the people who are paying for our stuff. That is important because they need to sell a product and you are the audience. So if you guys are saying no, they have nothing to sell. You know, some of these companies can fall back and be like, well, we sell toasters and we sell laptops. Not all of them can. They have to convince you that it's worth it. That is one thing. We were talking about audience a little bit. I want to talk about this because I think it's really important to people who also love TV. The streaming era, in many ways, has screwed you guys because it has cut the audience out of the feedback loop of television. Because in a world where there are no ratings and shows are successes or failures based off what the numbers team can put out through a PR press release, In a world where you do not have the ability to permanently buy shows you love on physical media and keep them, in an era where shows are serialized to create cliffhangers, but then pulled on season 2 so you never get the satisfaction of knowing what happens. In this world, you guys are being cut out, and it is not working. And I can tell you the reason I know it's not working. We are going back to advertising television. All of these companies, all of them are coming back and going, hey, that model we had where shows came out once a week, so people talked about it all week, and then it built buzz, and then like they really had to watch it, so they were willing to sit through some commercials, and then we sold the commercial space for money. But then because the shows were good, the commercials were really valuable. That's where we're going. It worked for decades, and guess what? It still works. The myth that you're going to sell people this like gym membership, infinite bucket of content, and we'll just keep finding new people to sign up is not financially working. We're going back to television, and we need audiences to understand the power they should be regaining. When a show comes out that we watch, that everybody watches, it is a hit, whether the exec likes it or not. And because executives like money, it doesn't matter if they hate the show. Because if you guys make it a hit, someone is going to pay for it. That is where we need to go back to. We're, in the push beyond this contract as we move forward to the next thing. I'm sorry, I know I'm ranting, but just that as we move forward into this thing, the kinds of things that we need to push for ratings in television. We need to push for fandoms of our shows to demand that they are not canceled with some infinite thing. There are so many shows by people of color. There's so many shows by marginalized communities that everyone I know in that community is watching, and then they get canceled and it's, well, no one watched it. Prove it. Show it to us.
Now you can see why I nudged Greg to run for council back in the day. We only have a couple minutes left. That was great, Greg. Thanks. Zoanne, Julie, any last things you'd like to say to this incredible audience of TV fans and industry people? And by the way, we all want to personally thank you. A lot of the events, and to the organizers, Caitlin, Emily, and the whole staff of ATX, a lot of events were canceled because writers weren't showing up to promote work, because that would, we're not supposed to do that. And we worked with them to create this event so that we could have a platform to share with you some of what, our concerns are, and to help, inform you. But the fact that this many people showed up and that you've also been supportive of the festival, despite the fact that writers haven't been as present, is really terrific. So thank you all for that. And thanks to ATX. Zoanne and Julie, we've got a couple minutes left. Any last thoughts that you want to share with this incredible group of people in here?
I think, the lesson that we all learn as we get in our Union 101 and our Writers Guild 101 is all that the Writers Guild is doing is negotiating for minimums and minimum protections. Your right to benefits, your right to a pension, the least amount of money that you can be paid to do this job. It is a baseline protection. On top of that, though, and this is something that falls outside of our sort of beef with leadership, with the producers' leadership, is we all have it theoretically in our power as storytellers and as workers for these companies to make change from within, outside of the boundaries of a strike, to fight for a bigger writer's budget so you can hire more staff writers, you can give more opportunities, to fight to get writers on the set, to fight for all those things. The burden of the success of whatever we are able to gain in this strike, the burden then passes on to those of us in the guild doing the job to continue to fight for those things. Because when you do have success, even though you're not getting paid for it the way you used to, you get the power, you get the confidence from the people who are deciding what your budget is, and you do have the ability to say, I need this. I need more writers of color on this staff. I need to give more opportunities to young writers, emerging writers who can't get their way in the door. I need to train my writers to be on set so that they can take my job. Because God, is it hard, and I don't want to do it for very much longer, And I will just say to everyone in this room who either is a writer, wants to be a writer, is part of this community, or even, in your day-to-day life, remember that we've got the power of a union fighting for our basic right to exist, but then we still have to carry that fight onwards and be advocates for each other.
I was just going to say a couple things. Like, one is that, obviously these companies have the money, but to even just put it into perspective, like some of these shows that they're doing on streaming are costing millions and millions and going over budget and all of that, and it's still mini rooms, and they're still not, they're paying writers minimum, and that is just, I can't even, it's unfathomable. And one thing that was really interesting, that something that's been just talked about, is the fact that the networks, with the structure of having the commercials and advertising, is so out of place with the streamers and what they want, that there's a thought, are they going to split? Because the networks have no,
they're not fighting
this game.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So when we had the agent action, which we all fight our agents a few years ago, and slowly but surely some of the smaller agencies came, and then slowly but surely the bigger ones came, and I just wonder if there's any possibility of that happening. So I'm just putting that out there. And just lastly, as far as like what Beau was saying about what you could do, if you are in LA or New York or Atlanta or whatever, I have met many pre-WGA people out there fighting. It takes 2 people to form a picket line. So get out there, be with us, and we will welcome you. Get lots of steps.
And remember, this isn't just about Hollywood. This is a labor movement. If you're part of a union, good on you, and do everything you can to fight. Management will never grant you anything. You have to always fight for it. Always. You don't get anything by asking for it. You have to demand it, and then you have to be willing to walk the walk when you can. And if you're not part of a union, but you're in an industry or a work environment where you can organize, consider it. And there's lots of people you can talk to in your community, I'm sure many in Austin, who are labor organizers. If you need any guidance on that, you don't have to it's not hard to find a good socialist,
And it does go both ways too. We were talking about this last night. Right now, IATSE and the Teamsters are on our lines with us. They are honoring our lines. They are going into their own negotiations in the next calendar year. We can't just be like, hey, thanks for not crossing our picket line, and then in a year from now be like, oh, gee, I'm so busy, so sorry. Like, I'm busy going to my job. Like, we're going to have to pay that back and pay that forward. As you said, the Teamster leader has a tattoo of Jimmy Hoffa on her arm. They will cut us if we don't show up. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I just want to I just have like a little mini Chris Kaiser speech moment that I'm required to say from NEGCOM. But
Chris Kaiser, by the way, is he's like the Kaiser Sose.
yeah, he's the co-chair
captain,
of
my
the negotiating
captain.
committee.
Yeah.
Also, to me, he made Party of 5, so that means a lot to me. But the idea that it is not an accident that we ended up in a situation in which every single part of creative Hollywood is united in rage against the producers. That takes a unique level of disrespect of labor and of the dignity of our work. And that is not a union fight. That is a human fight. And that is why our fight is your fight. And whether you are in a union or not in a union, the biggest thing you can do is join us in that solidarity in whatever way you can, because all of us have been in a work environment where our work is devalued and we are devalued, where we do not have a career, where we are talented and good. We are a cog in a machine who accomplishes a list of tasks. That is not right. It is not part of the American dream and is not a thing that can keep happening. That is why this is a wave of labor action that spreads beyond unions and beyond Hollywood. And it is a time as America for us to all join together to push back against this, because if we do, we can and we will win.
All right, let's end this the way that we started it. I want we're gonna clap in unison. We're gonna do it as a union. The back row, let's start with you. Do it together. Bring it forward. Next row. Here we go. Yes. All the way. Bring it all the way up. Yeah. Raise your fist. Thank you all so much. And I hope to see some of you out on the picking line. Thank you. Have a great festival.